Thousands of settlers colonize almost a whole continent and then create the most powerful country in the world. This video about the English colonization of America in the 16th and 17th centuries will help us to find the answer to this question. Reasons and prerequisites for the colonization of America by England. 1. At the beginning of the New Age, England already had the experience of conquering foreign territories and controlled Ireland and the city of Calais. The British were skilled sailors, and their merchant fleet was one of the largest in Northern Europe. In the late 15th century, Giovanni Caboto led an English expedition to explore the northeastern shores of North America. 2. Most of England's land was owned by the landlords, large landowners. The price revolution prompted aristocrats to sharply raise the price of land used by peasants, who were the absolute majority of the population. A huge mass of Englishmen was impoverished, and the number of beggars and homeless increased tens of times. Henry VIII and his successors adopted harsh laws that included torture, cutting off ears, and even hanging for begging. 3. Frequent civil wars and dynastic crises have created an opposition that has been threatened with execution. Religious diversity has exacerbated political struggles. This has also led to supporters of certain faiths being disgraced by the new rulers. 4. Protestant England had a fierce struggle with Catholic Spain for influence in Europe and the New World. The confrontation between these principled rivals was often carried out through piracy. The most famous of the English privateers, Francis Drake, robbed Spanish ships, explored the shores of the New World, and participated in the defeat of the Invincible Armada in 1588. These military successes of Elizabeth I and the weakening of Spanish influence in the Atlantic allowed the British to explore and colonize North America in a more secure environment. English colonization regions. One of the directions of English colonization was the lands of modern northern Canada, Belize, Nicaragua, Jamaica, and the Lesser Antilles. The first island to be colonized by the British in 1583 was Newfoundland Island. Rupert's Land was developed by the Hudson's Bay Corporation in 1670. In 1627, Barbados became the first successfully colonized land in the Caribbean Sea. And eventually, the British succeeded in capturing Belize, 1638, Jamaica, 1655, and the Mosquito Coast, 1655. From these northern colonies, England received valuable furs, wood, and fish. Southern ones became suppliers of cane sugar, tobacco, coffee, and chocolate. The priority for settlement of the British became the east part of the modern United States. Virginia was the first colony. It was named after the Virgin Queen Elizabeth and founded in 1607 by the London Joint Stock Company. Its capital was Jamestown, which was named after the king of the time, James I. In 1624, the company went bankrupt and the colony became the direct property of England. In 1620, a group of Puritans founded the city of Plymouth in New England. These fanatical believers were hostile to the Anglican Church and James I's Catholic entourage. Therefore, in the New World, they adhered strictly to their own confessional precepts and decided to make them mandatory for all residents of the Massachusetts prison colony. People from this region soon founded the Connecticut colony, where they established similar rules. Another example of salvation from religious discrimination was the foundation of Maryland by Roman Catholics in 1632. The colony was named after the wife of King Charles I, who was also a Catholic. The next group of colonies was the central ones, situated on the territory of modern New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. These territories were taken from the Netherlands by England in 1664 and were under direct royal control. In 1663, Charles II rewarded the 8 landlords for their participation in his ascension to the throne and granted them lands south of Virginia. This colony was named Carolina in the honor of the giver, and eventually split into the South and North. The landlord's power there was unconditional until the Glorious Revolution. The relationship between the colonists and the local population. The first with whom the British who arrived in America contacted were local Indians. The spread of the giving culture among the indigenous population had a good impact on the early development of good neighborly relations between the English and Aboriginals. In 1621, the local Wampanoag tribe helped the Plymouth colonists survive a hungry year. This event marked the beginning of a Thanksgiving celebration. Sometimes, marriages were formed between Indians and white settlers. This happened to the legendary Indian Pocahontas, who had first helped the colonists of Virginia and then converted to Christianity and married John Rolfe. However, the British desire to conquer the new lands, their contempt for the pagans, and frequent trade fraud led to tensions. The Indians, who did not like the presence of foreigners in their territory, were sometimes the first to engage in aggression. One of the first major clashes was the Jamestown Massacre, 1622, in which the Powhatan Indians attacked downtown Virginia and killed about 400 people, a third of the adult population of the city. In 1636, the colonists began a war with the Pequots, in which the latter were defeated 2 years later. In 1640, an era of long fur warfare began, in which the English, allied with the Iroquois, fought the Anglo-Indians, Gurons, and Shawnees. The latter was supported by France. In 1675, Macomet, the chief of the Wampanoags, who had been given the nickname King Philip by the Europeans in alliance with the small Nipmuc, rebelled against the English rule in New England. However, the colonists, possessing a numerical majority and the best weapons, won. Higher levels of military technology, the impact of European diseases, and the disunity of the Indian tribes made the British victorious. Technologically underdeveloped Indian tribes were killed or forced to relocate and assimilate. The population of the colonies and their life. Most of the inhabitants of the American colonies were white, impoverished natives of the British Isles, who were encouraged by poverty to sign indentured agreements and hire servants. This category of people was practically in a state of slavery and was totally dependent on their employers throughout the term of the contract. 57% of New England's population at the end of the 17th century was in this class. In addition to them, the New World was often visited by craftsmen, devastated gentry, land-poor yeomen, adventurers, representatives of religious minorities, merchants, and ambitious aristocracy. The majority of the population of Pennsylvania was German, fleeing religious persecution at home. There were also people from the Netherlands, Sweden, Huguenots from France, and assimilated Amerindians. Since 1619, a significant portion of the population of the central and southern colonies were black slaves originally from Africa, who were kidnapped or bought from the chiefs there and brought to America for slave labor on the plantations. Shipping across the ocean took place in hellish conditions that killed about 80% of slaves, and the average lifespan since arriving in the New World was 9 years. In the English colonies, they were deprived of their rights to personal liberty, education, and even marriage to members of other races. The main activity of the American colonists was agriculture. The new arrivals received large tracts of land of up to 2,000 acres, and the Maryland servants received a 50-acre plot and a grain reserve upon completion of their service. In warm and rainy summers, English settlers often managed to collect generous crops of tobacco, corn, wheat, and rye. However, famine and epidemics were frequent in the context of natural disasters and permanent crop failures. For example, only 10% of the British survived the famine of 1610 in Virginia. From the northern colonies to England, valuable wood, fur, and fish were transported. The southern and central colonies mainly exported tobacco and sugar. The central English government collected about 20% of the colony's income and exploited the colonies through navigational acts, which from 1663 prohibited the colonists from trading with other states, bypassing English ports. Power and administration in the colonies. American colonists were dependent on their kingdom, which provided them with weapons support and controlled their political life. By the end of the 17th century, there were 3 major forms of colonial administration: provincial, private, and royal patent. In all cases, these territories were subordinate to the king, but not to the English Parliament. New York, New Hampshire, Virginia, and Carolina were all provincial colonies. They were administered by a governor appointed by the king. The governor had the right to veto and could also postpone approval of the decisions of the local assemblies or dissolve them altogether. Local authorities were represented by assemblies chosen by the inhabitants of the colonies and adopted local laws and regulations. These acts were not meant to contradict English law. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland were private colonies. They had similar governments and local government principles. However, the governor was not appointed by the king, but by the local landlords. Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island, and Connecticut were administered under royal patents. Their self-governments had wider old rights, which guaranteed less intervention by the royal representatives. In most colonies, all taxpayers had the right to vote, which greatly expanded the range of voters compared to England. However, women, servants, and blacks, who made up the bulk of the population, were denied political rights. The consequences and results of England's colonization of the New World. The English colonization of America led to the destruction of most of the local Indian tribes, which could not withstand the pressure of European weaponry and imported diseases. The British established a number of colonies on the eastern coast of the continent, which eventually evolved into the United States. Cultural and religious diversity among the settlers of the region has contributed to a more democratic and tolerant political culture. They also colonized Newfoundland Island, Hudson Bay Coast, Belize, Mosquito Coast, Jamaica, Barbados, and a number of other territories in the Caribbean. All these colonies in the New World provided England with the necessary monetary and material resources for further imperial expansion in other parts of the world.